In the final winter of the Pacific War, when North China winds carved through the mountains like knives and snow swallowed entire villages without leaving a trace, a small column of American soldiers trudged through waist-deep drifts on a rescue patrol they had been told would likely find nothing alive. Only wreckage, abandoned shelters, and the kind of frozen silence that follows retreating armies. But as they pushed deeper into the white wilderness, a faint, almost ghost-like sound, a whimper more breath than voice, stopped them cold, and beneath a half-collapsed hut buried in snow, they found 3 Japanese women, barely more than shadows of themselves, their skin bluish, their clothes stiff with ice, and their eyes half open as if death had one hand on them already. Women who had been left behind during a chaotic withdrawal, considered too weak to move. The wounded, the expendable, the forgotten. The Americans, numb with cold themselves, stared at the scene in disbelief, because nothing in their training had prepared them for this. Enemies, yes. Fighters, yes, but not starving civilians clinging to life under a roof of broken beams. And without hesitation, Sergeant Miller dropped to his knees, brushing snow from a woman's face, her breath shallow as thread, while Private Langley tore off his own gloves to check pulses that barely existed, the men exchanging looks that said everything. The mission was no longer a patrol, it was now a race against time and against the cold. They wrapped the women in whatever they had, coats, blankets, ponchos, lifting their fragile bodies with the gentleness of men handling dying birds, and when the medic whispered that they might not survive the hour, the Americans decided they would carry them back anyway, even if it meant walking until their legs gave out, and so began a brutal, silent march through blinding wind, each soldier carrying a woman in his arms or across his back, their boots slipping on hidden ice, their breaths coming out as clouds that froze instantly. The snowstorm thickened, the world turning to nothing but white and pain. But the men pushed on, driven by something that had nothing to do with orders. Something human, older than war itself. At one point, Corporal Jenkins collapsed to his knees, the woman on his back slipping. And he forced himself up with a roar, refusing to let her fall, refusing to let the cold claim one more life. Hours passed like years, until finally the camp's distant tents appeared as dark shapes through the storm, and the Americans stumbled inside, exhausted, frostbitten, trembling, but refusing to rest until the women were placed in warm blankets by the stove, medics rushing in with hot broth and heated canteens, the women drifting between life and death, whispering weak words of disbelief. Why were Americans helping them? Why were the devils from the propaganda films treating them with mercy and not brutality? And when one of the women, still barely conscious, clasped Sergeant Miller's arm and cried softly, unable to understand why strangers had carried her miles through a killing storm, the camp fell into a hush, the Americans realizing that this moment, this act of compassion, would linger longer than any bullet fired, any battle won, a small defiance against the hatred both sides had been taught. Over the next days, the women slowly recovered, learning the strange comfort of warm meals, clean bandages, friendly faces, discovering that the men they had been taught to fear were simply tired soldiers trying to bring some sanity back into a world shattered by war. And when spring finally melted the snow, the women, alive, walking, smiling for the first time in months, stood before the Americans who had carried them through the darkness, bowing deeply, tears streaking down their cheeks, knowing that they had survived not because of luck, but because their supposed enemies had chosen to be human when it mattered most. A memory that would outlive the war, outlive the cold, and remain a quiet miracle etched into the lives of everyone who had been there that night in the endless white.
Please don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon.